It's now 8 o'clock and it's time for us to get into the segment that we call Black and White. Now, Black and White is generally a social, a segment where we tackle social issues. And today we'll like to talk about alcoholism and its addiction, and more importantly, how to get out of it. And remember, you're welcome to participate in this conversation. We'll have the phone lines open, and feel free to call in and give us your experience, possibly share your experience, or also, in case you have a question, you're free to do that. Now, joining me in studio to have that conversation, I'm joined by Dr. Mercy Karanja, who's a psychiatrist. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm also joined by Edwin Mboro, who is a recovering alcoholic. Thank you for joining us, Edwin. Let me start with you, Edwin, and thank you first of all for sharing with us an experience I'm sure which many would shy to do, but for the sake of helping others, thank you for coming into studio. Let me start from where your journey began when it comes to alcohol abuse.
Good morning, everyone. I started alcohol in 2003, immediately after my KCSE. That's when I started. That's when I took that December of 2003. That's when I took my first drink.
Your first drink. So it was not even in high school. It was after you finished your high school.
After high school.
What were the circumstances that surrounded you taking the drink, that first drink?
I had never taken alcohol before. I was with friends, so I was at a party with friends I went to school with back in primary school around my home area. So I just went and I had my first drink, and to be very honest, it was amazing. I didn't know it would lead to what led 12 years later, but it was amazing.
From what I've heard, alcohol, for anybody who is starting, first of all, the taste is not that good. If you get drunk, the experience is it's not that friendly. So what is it that you found amazing about it?
I remember, I'll always remember that drink, because the minute I took that drink, I felt numb. I tried to bite my lips and I felt I couldn't feel them, you know? And that was amazing.
Must have been a very strong drink.
It was these funny drinks. I think people call them gunias or sachets, zile za kitambo. So that's what I started with.
Okay.
And it made me feel numb. And I only took one. And when I went home, I couldn't feel anything. You know, I was feeling, you know, macho. You know, I was feeling I'm
like
the
you
man.
own the world.
Yes.
Okay.
And slowly, now I went to college, and I had access to a little cash here and there. And that's how my journey started, basically.
All right, and I'll come back to you maybe just to continue with that journey, but allow me to bring in Dr. Karanja now. Dr. Karanja, does that sound familiar? I mean, somebody who's never had alcohol, and maybe out of the fact that now he has finished KCSE, there's a cause to celebrate, I am mature, I am grown. Does that sound familiar as a journey, where the journey begins?
Yes, it's a very familiar story, because a lot of people who indulge in alcohol use their first time. Most of them, it's experimental. And then out of curiosity, they want to see, what does this do to me? And then the experience they get out of that now determines the journey after that. If he enjoyed it, definitely now he'll continue using it, because he feels there's a positive outcome from using alcohol. But if somebody detests it from the first day, they might now say, this is not a thing for me. It's common that some people will go into it to look for an escape. Like he says, he got numb. And then after that, he kept using so he can get this nice feeling he got. So there's a pattern that we see in people when they're starting to use drugs and alcohol. And it's usually to look for something, and when they get it, then it becomes their weapon to run to when they're in those situations that they are probably running from, or the experiences that they're trying to
get away from.
Yes.
What role does socialization have in this, addiction? Because I've seen people who've grown up with no alcohol in the house, and that does not, mean they'll not become alcoholic. I've seen others who basically have become alcoholic because they've seen their parents, they've seen their uncles, so they basically fall into the same trap.
Socialization has a big role to play. We talk about many causes of alcohol use, and ranging from biological reasons. We talk about genetics, being genetically predisposed, and environmental factors, availability, how you're socialized, the environment you grew up in, and also peer pressure. And then the other psychological reasons that may trigger somebody to use alcohol. But environment definitely plays a big role in somebody ending up becoming alcohol addicted.
Okay, Edwin, let me come back to you. So you took your first drink, you felt numb, went home and you felt you were king of the world. How did that journey now continue for you now to actually now get hooked to it? Because I imagine that, I mean, that was a party that you went for, so it was available.
Yeah.
What happened after that?
So immediately after that drink, now I started slowly associating with those people. The guys we were in primary school with and some of them in high school. You know, I started associating with them more in wherever they are going, whatever they are attending. And by January of 2004, I had already started going to college. So I used to have a little pocket money here and there. So I started taking what I could afford with that little money. And I can't tell you at the exact point I got hooked, but it came to, by the time it was 2015, in my office drawer I used to have alcohol to work.
Which now you take, obviously, intermittently during the day.
Yes.
Okay.
I had to do that, you know. At home, I had to have a drink in the morning, you know. And at times when things were very thick and the wife is complaining, I used to hide it somewhere in the fence so that if she complains, I'll tell her today I'm not drinking, but later during the night, I'll wake up and take a sip and then take it back to where I had hid it in the fence. So slowly, but it was, I think, and Dr. Masi can agree, it is progressive. It doesn't happen all at once.
Okay. Yeah. And a good place to bring you in, Dr. Karanja, there are people, many people who drink alcohol. Not everybody becomes alcoholic. There are those who are able to control. What is it that brings you to the tipping point? What is that thing that makes somebody now change or turn or progressively become alcoholic? Whereas there are others you may even be drinking together, but they know where to call a stop.
Yeah, there are different levels of alcohol use. You know, alcohol use necessarily, it's not bad. Really, that's why it's legal in most countries. But what determines the alcohol becoming bad is when you become an abuser, dependent, or you're using harmfully. So there are those people who will abuse. They'll binge drink. They'll stay for many months without drinking. But the day they drink excessively and they put themselves at harm, both in health-wise, accidents, and all that kind of thing. And there are those who become dependent. And we define somebody as being dependent, just like he has very easily explained. There are several factors that will tell that this person is becoming dependent, right? From person who is craving alcohol, they cannot stop, they are trying to stop, but they cannot. It affects their social and occupational life. It affects the way they relate with society. They become tolerant such that they need higher and higher amounts to get the high they used to get. Or when they don't drink, they develop withdrawal, and that's why you hear him saying in the morning he has to take a drink to avoid feeling sick. So what determines whether somebody becomes dependent or not? It has a lot to do with the biological reasons. One of them is because there are some people who are genetically predisposed to develop alcohol use disorders.
When you say genetically predisposed, are we saying that then they are almost at a very high risk of becoming alcoholic despite whether they take or they don't?
Yes. You'll find that alcohol use disorder may run in families. So some people who may have had a relative with an alcohol use disorder are at higher risk. But it does not necessarily mean that they will become alcohol dependent.
Is that genetic or it's just exposure? Because, you know, we started by saying that if I grew up in a family where alcohol was used by my relatives and everybody, it becomes a norm. In my head, it becomes that this is the way life is. And in fact, if I found a family that maybe they don't take alcohol, I'll be like, what's wrong with these guys? But that is different from when you say genetic. It means it's in me. It's something which is in my DNA.
Yes, partly. But it doesn't mean that it's purely about genetic predisposition, because remember also there are other factors that determine. So it's just not about biology, it's about also the environment. So you'll also find somebody who is genetically predisposed, but they observe the consequences of drinking in their relatives and they decide not to drink at all. So environmental factors also play a big role. Is there accessibility to the alcohol? Is there socialization towards using alcohol? Is there a sense of acceptance when you use the alcohol? more than when you don't. Then, of course, there are psychological reasons. People who are not able to cope with normal life stressors, and they decide that they find that when they use alcohol, it helps them. People with mental illnesses have also been found to be one of the major risk factors for somebody to use alcohol. People with depression, anxiety disorders, personality disorders, they'll tend towards using alcohol and drugs. Then, of course, there will be other determinants, like even other life events, either positive or negative life events that might trigger somebody to go into alcohol use.
Alcohol abuse.
So to a big extent, it's a combination of all those factors, biological factors, environmental factors, social factors, and psychological factors.
Okay, and at this point, we'll have the phone lines open in case you have any comments regarding the topic that we have here today, maybe questions. If you'd like to weigh in, feel free to do that. We'll allow you to do that. But let me come to you, Edwin. At what point did you now know that this is a problem? Because you said it was progressive. And for anything progressive, you sometimes don't realize. You just think that, you know, I just want to have a bit of fun. But at what point did you realize that, wait, this has now gone beyond just me going to buy a drink to a point where if I don't get this drink, there are consequences?
To be honest, up to the time I was going to rehab, I was in total denial. Because what happened, one morning I woke up with very serious withdrawals.
What were those withdrawals?
I was hallucinating, I was vomiting.
And this was because you had not taken any alcohol?
Yeah, that morning my wife had cleaned out all the alcohol in the house. And when she saw what was happening, she actually called my HR. And because there's a program to help people who are facing addiction. So when she talked to the HR was, no, Edwin is a very good employee. Nobody is actually complaining about him. Are you sure there's no problem between you two? And it was decided that the next day I should go and see a counselor at the workplace. Now, when I went to see the counselor, I think she's aware of the cage test. I failed because...
And what is the cage test?
The cage test, basically, the C is for cutting down. Do you at times feel you want to cut down? The A is for anger. Whenever you take alcohol, whatever you are using, do you feel angry about it when you look at what has transpired? Guilty. Do you ever feel guilty about how you are using your substance of your drug of choice? You know? And for E, the E is for eye opener. You know, whenever you wake up in the morning, unataka kutoa lock. You get? So for me, I answered yes. And after that, they did. I was told to go and see a psychiatrist within the workplace, and he recommended me to go to a detox center, Chiromolin Medical Center. Up to that time, actually, I thought I was going for some tests. When I went, I was told that my problem is not as simple as I thought. I was very angry at the time because as at that time, I was okay. I was going to work, I was performing, and I was living my life. So you are coming here to tell me that I'm addicted or, you know, something like that. I was in total denial.
Okay, and maybe just to backtrack a little bit, how was your relationship with your wife? Was that affected?
It was rocky. I'm telling you, it was rocky. And I remember after rehab, we had a family discussion, and my wife told me that there was a time that my family, they saw that I was not violent, physically, verbally, I wasn't, but I was never there. So it was putting a lot of pressure because she was always worried, where am I? I'm going for 3 days without going home. You get? So my sisters, my family, they sat her down and told her, you know what? This guy is our son. We love him, okay? But he's putting you through a lot. If for any reason you feel that
it's too much,
we will support you. Because as my parents said, you are also our daughter. And we wouldn't want any of our daughter to go through what you're going through. So if you feel, you know, so if it comes to that point that your family is now, you know, even worried about your wife to the extent that, you know, they don't know what to do. You get, so yeah, it was okay.
We'll come to support and how important support was for you, and maybe even from Dr. Karanja. But before that, at what point does one admit to themselves that there is actually a problem? And secondly, what signs can one look out for? Because from his story, his employer was not even aware, because he was able to perform, and some of them, maybe even the drugs help them perform even more. Maybe they're able to actually inject more work to hide. But how does one, first of all, identify that, wait, there's a problem? And secondly, those around you, how can we identify if we have somebody in the house and possibly they may be hiding it very well?
Let me start with the first question about how does somebody get to the point they realize that they have a problem. Most of the times you find persons with alcohol use disorders, they will not most of the time realize they have a problem. And you find that when they are confronted with people, they'll tend to, we call it, people will say deny, but we say it's pre-contemplation. They're still not, they don't see it as a problem. To them, it's something they're used to. They do it every day. It's like when you drive a car every day, whether you hit a pothole,
you don't even think about it when you're driving.
Exactly,
it's become
yes.
Second nature.
Yes, it's second nature for them. So a lot of people will be in that pre-contemplation stage until somebody points it out to them. Look, this is bringing a problem. And most of the times it's either family, employer, friends who will now become concerned. And then that's why even when it comes to the recovery process, we meet the person where they are at, and we'll discuss that later. Then how do you get to realize somebody is having a problem? Mm-hmm. One of the things you need to notice, change in behavior. Like somebody perhaps starts being late for work, and they were previously coming on time, absenting themselves with flimsy reasons a lot of times. Sometimes even at home, you'll notice the person, the hours of coming home have changed. If it's a child, even their behavior, the pattern of behavior, the people they're engaging with they're different, and they'll always have these excuses to go to so many events, but at the end of the day, you find there's a lot of loose ends, gaps in their stories. Then there might be a smell you'll detect, because alcohol, definitely, there is a smell. Another thing that you'll notice is unexplained accidents. You know, people come with injuries that you can't really tell, where did you sustain this from? And then another thing is finances, because alcohol definitely drives you, to poverty when you continue using. So you find that people will also have a lot of gaps in explaining their finances, where they are going to. Even body-wise, they will change. People who use alcohol a lot tend to neglect their nutrition, their body. So you'll notice somebody is losing weight, they're not eating well, and sometimes they'll even complain of symptoms like having pain in the abdomen, a lot of acidity. So some of those things, then other people will notice, when now they become to the level of dependence, what you notice is the withdrawal symptoms. When they have not drunk alcohol, they'll be very irritable. They'll be very irritable, they'll shake, they'll have the shakes, they will sweat a lot. Some of them get to the extent of developing now, when it's very severe and they have not drunk, they get now severe withdrawal symptoms, which include hallucinations, and some go to full-blown psychosis. And alcohol withdrawal syndrome is one of the most dangerous conditions that somebody can
just
get
hold that
into.
thought right there. We're going to come back to alcohol withdrawal syndrome. But I want to take a call from from Elkanah, who's calling from Pipeline. Good morning, Elkanah, to your... All right, I think we've lost that call, but we have Stanley Onsario. To your question or comment, Stanley? All right, sorry. Again, we've lost that line. But yes, you are talking about the alcohol withdrawal syndrome. What is that?
Well, when somebody becomes alcohol dependent, it is a state where you cannot stay without using the alcohol. And you develop what we call tolerance, such that you require more and more amount of alcohol for you to be able to get the same effect that you used to have previously. If you suddenly stop or reduce the quantity you're drinking, say you are drinking 10 beers to get a high, and you reduce to 2, or you stop completely suddenly, then you develop a sickness, which is usually characterized by symptoms like include tremor, feeling anxious, getting sweaty, your heart is racing, you feel like vomiting, some actually vomit, and some people, it develops into hallucinations, where you hear voices that other people can't hear, or you see things that other people are not seeing. And some people even get to the point of getting seizures, that is convulsions, like kama kifafa. And then it can get to severe stage where we call delirium tremens, which is usually now a medical emergency that must be managed in an ICU
hospital.
setting. Yes.
Wow. Let me take a call from Moses Elkanah. Moses, to your comment or your question.
Yeah, my comment is that I have a brother and my dad.
Okay.
Wote wamekuwa like alcohol imashika kabisa, to an extent that they even do things that I don't understand. I cannot do anything just because of that. How do I do?
How do you?
How do I help them?
Okay. All right, Moses, we'll come back to you, and thank you for calling. Yeah, the phone lines are open, so if you'd like to call and ask a question or give a comment, you're welcome to do that. Let me see. Let me come back to you, Edwin. And you talked about now your wife calling your employer and raising an alarm, and that maybe might have been a point of salvation for you, so to speak. How important is support? Family support and whatever, those people who are around you, and maybe also give us your insight of what you were going through at that time, and how important your wife was to you at that time, or did you feel like she was actually interfering with your privacy?
First, I want to say that I have been sober for 3 years, 5 months, and 2 days. That's about 1,247 days. For those days, I have not touched alcohol, and I have been going through normal life circumstances and other issues. Support is integral in any person in recovery. And to add on to that, I also have a mental condition, severe ADHD and anxiety. If you look at me, you can see whenever I'm anxious,
You scratch you?
Yeah, I scratch myself. Now, back then it used to be severe because I used to peel off and I used to bleed, and I wouldn't know. Now that is under control. Why? I have support. If you take my phone right now, you'll find contacts of psychiatrists, persons in recovery like me, psychologists, my family, and my wife. Even after being given the go-ahead by so many people, even outside there, you leave this guy. She didn't leave. When I was in rehab, I went to rehab after the detox phase. I went to rehab in Limuru, the retreat rehab. When I went there, we had counseling sessions with the family. I was there for 3 months. So the family used to come once in a while, and we used to sit down. So my wife never failed to come for those sessions. She got to understand the kind of person I am. She got to understand about the mental condition. She got to understand about my anxiety. I also was diagnosed with depression because sometime in 2011 I was very suicidal. She got to understand all that.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to hold that thought, and we'll come back to you because your story is very gripping, but we need to take a break. And when we come back, let's look at some of the solutions. Moses Elkanah, I still have your question on how you can help your brother and your father on alcoholism. So don't go away. We are coming back with that right here on Morning Express on Black and White. We take a break. We'll be right back.